Hello and welcome back to the Ask Abhijit Show, episode 227 today. I hope everybody is doing great wherever you are in the world. And before we begin, let's see who all is there on the live chat. Let me greet some of you. I can see Super Rex, Biswajit Lod, Shiva Namapriya, Pavan Kumar Singh, Om Bekerikar, Tommy Shelley, Pranay Paul from Kolkata, Sri Kumar Menon, Mr. 88ers, Sally Krishna Raghunath from the Surinamese Netherlands, Kumar Ayush, Geopolitical Dubai, hello, Jainam, Salman Maverick, Tushar Kalburgi, Chetan Aradhya, Samarth Tripathi, Jijin 1045, AJ Raol, Practice Gamer, Imran Naimi, Vikramaditya Rathore, Dungar Singh Chauhan, hello, Super Rex, Dios Pitra, Pushkar Rai, Rajat Raghu Varan, KG Bhai, Tanmoy Chakraborty, Vaibhav Dangra, Utkarsh Zij, Jagdish Mali, Maklavin Namaskar, Jainam, Chinglin Khomba Yumlembam from Manipur, Mac 4, Sergeant Skylan, Chetan Aradhya, KG Bhai TTTT, Hardik M, Abhijit M, Pratik Kishore Acharya Chaudhary, Mrinal Bhatt, Vikramaditya Rathore, Samarth Tripathi, Jayavardhan Sain, Yogesh Upadhyay, SDV, Bai, Anurag, Kapalin, Sid Love Science, Arya, Mahesh Reshta, Prakhar Gupta, Remya Dilip, Feminist Slayer, My Cat's Birthday, Amisha Mishra, hello, Harbi on Wheels, Shubhayu, and everybody else. All right, all right. Let's get going with the questions. I've taken questions from that you've asked in the comments. I'll take a whole bunch of those and then maybe some from the live chat as well. So let's go and see what are the questions that we have today. What questions do we have? Let's begin. And here we are. A whole bunch of questions about the same thing. Donald Trump and his expansionism. Chaitanya on tech, Pranay Paul, the Aryan Knight, and Gaurav Jat Mamli, and a whole lot of other people have asked this very similar questions. So, hopefully, these questions will represent what everybody has asked. So, okay, Chaitanya, thank you for watching for 2 years. Appreciate it very much. The question is, why does Trump want Greenland, going as far as to say he will use military force to take it? Why is Trump insisting on taking Canada, Greenland, the Panama Canal? Is it simply a pressure tactic for trade negotiations and tariffs, or does it make economic and strategic sense for the US to govern these regions officially? What's my views on Trump's speeches to annex Greenland, Canada, the Panama Canal, and change the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America? Is Trump actually going to do it? Both France and Germany have threatened the US with repercussions if the US tries to take Greenland by force. Do you think they're allowed to go against the US? What consequences would both countries face for their actions? All right, okay, we get it. Okay, everyone's interested in knowing what's going on. Is Trump serious? Is he actually planning to annex Greenland, Canada, the Panama Canal, even Mexico, like some people are suggesting? Is he serious? Can he do it? Is the US capable of doing this? And will they face any repercussions if they try and do that? And has Trump said that he will use military force? So first of all, when he was asked this question in a press conference, whether he would be willing, whether he will deny the use of military force, using military force, he said, no, I will not rule it out. I will not rule it out. So he's not said that he will use military force. He has said that he will not rule out the use of military force to achieve his objectives. Okay. So all of that. So what's going on? So Trump has made it very clear that he considers Canada the 51st state of the United States. He taunted Justin Trudeau while he was still prime minister by calling him the governor of the great state of Canada. So he has said that he will annex Canada. And he said that he will use economic force rather than military force to annex Canada. When it comes to Greenland, he's very serious about it. When it comes to the Panama Canal, he's going back into the older chapters of history, and he has pointed out that this canal was actually an American canal. The Americans paid for it, and then it was handed over to the nation of Panama somewhere in the late 1960s or thereabouts. So the US paid for the thing. It was supposed to be US territory, and that's what the two governments had agreed to. And then Jimmy Carter, I believe, or whoever it was, I don't remember who it was, handed over this canal to Panama after there was a US mediated coup in Panama, which brought a pro-US government to power, and then they handed it over to Canada, to Panama. So, what's Trump trying to do? And is this all possible? And where does it fit in vis-a-vis the grand geopolitical scheme of things? So, Trump is serious. I'm not sure whether he wants to actually do all of this: Canada, Panama Canal, Mexico, Greenland, all of that. Or maybe he's just after a couple of things, like maybe Greenland and Panama, and maybe he's just putting Canada also on the platter, just to make people worry about Canada, and while he's actually trying to achieve his bigger objectives. Or maybe he wants Canada as well. At the end of the day, the US can do whatever it wants. All of these territories are essentially under US control, directly or indirectly. Denmark is a small little nation. They have a very tenuous hold on Greenland. The US can just walk in, and there's nothing Denmark can do about it. Canada, well, what can Canada do about this? Canada, there's nothing they can do about it. And apparently their economy is being subsidized to the tune of, I don't know how many billions of dollars every year by the Americans. So without the American help, they would collapse. So there's that. And the US, like Trump said, can use economic pressure to induce Canada to merge with the US. When it comes to the Panama Canal, the US can do it. Of course, they can do it. There's nothing Panama can do to prevent the US from taking over the canal. So what will eventually happen, most likely, is that the US will give some token amount of money, some token payment to each country, a few $1 billion here and there. Maybe they'll give $10 billion or something, I'm just guessing, to Panama for the canal. Maybe they'll give a few $1 billion to Denmark for Greenland, and Canada, there's nothing they'll give them. They'll just make them part of their territory. So why would you do this? Why would Trump want to do this? Why does the US need so much more territory? Isn't it a headache to govern all this? Or maybe the cost benefit ratio, it is skewed in the direction of the benefits rather than cost. So there's more benefit than cost, maybe. What could it be like? So let's take a look at the map, and that perhaps will help us understand what's going on. Everything in geopolitics boils down to the map. So here's the map of the world. We go to the Western Hemisphere. Here you have the US. So he's talking about Canada, which is a gigantic country, larger than the US. He's talking about the Panama Canal, which is over here, as you can see. We're zooming into it, right? That's where the Panama Canal is located. And then there's Greenland, which is this large, frozen, apparent wasteland. Now, here's the deal. Greenland is rich in natural resources: oil, gas, coal, metals, whatnot. And so that's why it makes a lot of sense for the US to acquire this territory from Denmark. Denmark has a very small presence in Greenland. They have a very tenuous historical claim to it. It's mostly been a self-governing and mostly ungoverned territory. It's mostly empty. It's all frozen glaciers. So there is that. Then Canada is an extremely large, extremely resource-rich territory. If the US acquires Canada plus Greenland, they will have a territory that is larger than that of Russia. Do you understand? Russia is currently the largest nation in the world. If the Americans acquire Greenland plus Canada, they will have access to the natural resources of an entire continent, and the territory they will own will be larger than that of Russia. And there will be a primary player in the Arctic Ocean region, the Arctic Circle region, which, because of climate change, because of global warming, is slowly thawing up. And there's a lot of resources to be found under the ocean and in this overall region, the Arctic Ocean region. And right now, Russia is the major player here, and Canada. Well, Canada is hardly a player, but it controls a lot of Arctic territory because it owns the territory. So with the US acquiring Canada and Greenland, they will become probably a more major player than Russia. They'll maybe bump Russia to number 2 when it comes to the Arctic great game. So that is the reason why the Americans are going for Canada and Greenland, and they will most likely acquire these two territories within a few years before Trump demits office. And when it comes to Panama, the Panama Canal, well, it's an extraordinarily important geopolitical, geographical choke point. in the world. It's one of the major choke points, like the Suez Canal, the Malacca Strait, and much more. The Bab al Mandeb Strait, the Strait of Hormuz, and the Panama Canal. So a very very large portion of maritime traffic passes through the Panama Canal, and whoever controls it controls essentially global trade to a very large extent. So it makes sense for the Americans to control this and not leave it to Panama, which kind of is a US proxy, but why not control it ourselves entirely, directly, without the need for for going through a third party. So the Americans manufactured the canal, they constructed the canal, they paid for the whole thing, and then they gave it to Panama. So now it makes sense for them to take it back. So once again, if the Americans decide to do this, it can happen tomorrow. So a lot of geopolitical change is coming up. I believe Trump is very serious when he says he wants to do this. And it makes a lot of sense for the US in this very rapidly changing geopolitical climate to acquire these territories and take direct control and ownership of these territories without having to go through intermediaries like the Canadian Prime Minister, the Danish government, whatever. They'll just walk in and take over. So it will need some reorganization of the US. I mean, Canada has multiple states, Alberta, Saskatchewan, British Columbia, Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec, Newfoundland and Labrador, and the Northwest Territories, Yukon, Nunavut, and so on. So will each of these territories of Canadian provinces become a US state, or will Canada overall become a US possession the way Puerto Rico is? So all that needs to be seen. It remains to be seen, but I think it's a matter of time before the Americans take over Canada and Greenland. I'll be surprised if they don't take Canada. Greenland is essentially just you just need a signature on paper from Trump for that to happen, and so with Panama. Canada will maybe a little more delicate operation, but it too, from my perspective, will happen. So that's how I see this happening. Now let's come back to the questions. Does it make economic and strategic sense for the US to govern these regions officially? Yes, it does make a lot of sense for them to govern these regions directly. Some of it could be a pressure tactic, but what's the point of threatening to take over Canada? I mean, who are you pressurizing by doing that? You're not really pressurizing anybody. So I think it could happen within the next 4 years, and that's going to be very interesting. It'll totally recalibrate, reconfigure the geopolitical chessboard. Okay, Abhipal Singh says, with Musk, excuse me. Abhipal Singh says, with Trump and Musk threatening European politicians with scandals in the annexation of Canada and Greenland, do you think NATO will disintegrate? I think NATO will not disintegrate. To the contrary, NATO will become more centralized and stronger. I think that's what will most likely happen. We know that Elon Musk is right now actively participating in the internal politics of multiple nations, including the UK and Germany. And Trump is obviously threatening. He has announced that he plans to annex various other nations like Greenland and Canada, etc. So Greenland is part of Denmark. Canada is a sovereign nation. Well, technically it is. Okay. So if the US annexes these nations and the US interferes, meddles in the internal politics of Germany, UK, etc., what could happen? Will it cause NATO to disintegrate? Let's see. See, UK is a US, what's the V word? It's a US vassal. Okay. It exists at the pleasure of the US. It acts as an extension of the US economy and US foreign policy, the UK. The UK is not really a sovereign nation. Okay, it's an extension of the US. It's a vassal, a feudatory of the US. And when it comes to Germany, it's a nation that's under permanent US occupation, military occupation since 1945. Take a look at how many permanent US military bases exist on German soil. Take a look at who wrote the German constitution and so on. You will see that Germany is hardly a sovereign nation. It's a US possession. So the US can do whatever it wishes with Germany, and they will install a chancellor of their choice. It's always a chancellor of the US's choice in Germany. So no big deal whether it's the UK, whether it's Germany. There's nothing these nations can do about what the US does to them. There's nothing they can do to remove themselves from NATO. It will not be allowed to happen. So I think NATO is gonna become a more monolithic bloc going forward. When it comes to a multilateral organization, the most powerful nation within that organization is always the top dog, and that's a nation that calls all the shots. With NATO, it's always been that way. And now it's going to be even more that way. So I don't see NATO disintegrating. I see NATO becoming even more monolithic going forward. That's how I see it happening. Okay, Nanda Kizor says Andrew Tate has started his own party and is running for the next UK election. What are your thoughts on this? And is Elon Musk behind this? Because he was going all out on the UK government the past 2 months, and also he urged for a regime change. There's multiple moving parts in this. So I remember about a year or so ago, somebody asked me on a live chat on a previous episode of this show, what are your views on Andrew Tate? And I was like, who's Andrew Tate? I've never heard of him. And then after that, subsequently, I took a look at who this guy is, and now I know what he means, what he is, who he is, what he represents, and so on and so forth. The manosphere and whatnot, right? So now Andrew Tate has thrown his hat into the ring in UK politics. I think he's a UK citizen. His father is American, but I think he and his brother are UK citizens, British citizens. So he's thrown his hat into the ring. He has launched a new political party called BRUV, B-R-U-V. There's a Twitter account associated with that. And he says it's 100% serious. And he says he has the money to fund his own campaigns and all that. So what does it mean? I don't think it's going to really fundamentally change UK politics. I'm not sure if he will be... I'm not sure if he will be taken seriously at this point. You have to really, pay your dues before you're taken seriously in politics. You come out of nowhere and throw your hat in the ring, people won't take you seriously. But if you persevere over 2 or 3 or 4 electoral cycles, then it shows people that you are serious. Just saying you're serious is not enough. So you have to persist, you have to persevere, you have to pay your dues, you have to fight in the trenches and so on. So once he does that over a few years, he may be taken seriously. He may. At this point in time, it's too early for that. And Elon Musk has been criticizing, lambasting, excoriating Keir Starmer and his track record with very good reason. The UK is probably the world's rape capital, right? And Elon Musk has been highlighting this. I mean, the Rotherham grooming scandal and all that, that's been going on for 20 plus years. It's been known for a very long time. Everyone knew about this, but they all kept it quiet. They all brushed it under the carpet. And there was a time when this guy, Keir Starmer, the current Prime Minister of the UK, was the head of the Crown Police or whatever it's called. And he was in charge of dealing with this. And he ensured that no action is taken against the Pakistanis who were doing this all across the country. And I don't understand what sort of nation the UK is. They get all riled up when there's a negative result in a football match. They go on a rampage, hooliganism and all. But when this is being done to their daughters, they're just quiet like sheep. I don't know what kind of nation it is. I think it's a bunch of losers, the UK. They should be ashamed of themselves. Oh, good God. So that's what Elon Musk has been talking about. And that's what I think Andrew Tate also has referenced. So I don't think it's going to really affect the results of future elections immediately, Andrew Tate's entry into UK politics. But Elon Musk has been calling for a regime change for sure. So most likely within some time, within a few months, maybe within a few weeks, Keir Starmer will most likely resign sooner or later. I'm saying this right now. I'm making a prediction. Keir Starmer will find his situation increasingly untenable as Prime Minister. He will soon resign, maybe in a few weeks, maybe in a few months. And then a new US puppet will be brought to power, will be installed on the seat of the UK Prime Minister. And at the end of the day, it will make no difference whatsoever. Maybe the grooming gangs, there may be some sort of clampdown on it to some extent. I'm not sure you can give justice to all the girls who have been, victimized Generations of girls have been victimized. I don't think they'll be able to bring the Pakistani terrorists or whatever, the monsters to justice. But yeah, that's the kind of nation the UK has become. Pathetic. They should be ashamed of themselves. They should be ashamed to show their face in public, the people of the UK. Absolute bunch of pathetic cowards. That's what they are. Yeah, so these are my thoughts on this. Pranay Paul says China's Xi Jinping has recently acknowledged external uncertainties in his New Year's speech. How do you see China's behavior unfolding this year? Is the economic and political bubble under Xi becoming too large to sustain? Additionally, with reports of sudden virus outbreaks in China, do you think these could be deliberate disruptions? How should India prepare and respond proactively to avoid risks and ensure stability? So Xi Jinping has definitely, certainly, indeed acknowledged external uncertainties in his New Year's speech. And well, every nation faces external uncertainties. There's always an environment outside of a nation, an environment you cannot directly control, that affects what happens to you, to your economy, to your nation, to your exports, imports, and so on and so forth, international relations, all of that. There's always external uncertainties. But what Xi Jinping is referring to is the re-election of Donald Trump, and we know that Donald Trump is a hawk when it comes to the US relationship with China. He is the president who started the US trade war against China by increasing the tariffs and trade barriers and all that. And he's gonna, once he is back in the White House, he's gonna push forward on that. He is right now like an elephant stomping around the room, right? He is planning to annex nations, entire nations. And that's going to totally upend the geopolitical chessboard, the geopolitical balance of power, the geopolitical equations, the set of equations, and so on. And that's going to be very concerning for China. When it comes to Biden, he himself has carried forward the trade war that Trump launched, and it's really affected China very badly. There's trade and tariff barriers all over the place for China. China is the world's largest manufacturer, but now with so many trade and tariff barriers, it's not. It doesn't make economic sense for nations to import goods from China because of the trade and tariff barriers, which makes the goods more expensive. So it makes sense to source them locally or from other places, right? And that's what the West is doing to China. The West obviously follows the lead of the US. So that's the deal. So China is facing a lot of pressure, increasing pressure. It's feeling the pinch. So that's the situation with China. So that's the external uncertainties that President Xi Jinping was referring to. So how do I see China's behavior unfolding this year? They will continue the pressure on Taiwan. There's no doubt about that. And they will continue whatever activities they do in the border regions, including the recently created new counties in Aksai Chin to kind of rile India to a bit. Yeah. So those provocative activities will continue. The pressure on Taiwan will continue. Maybe there'll be something with Japan, the Senkaku, Diaoyu Islands, those overflights, the South China Sea issue will continue. So they won't pull down on any of that. But when it comes to the overall larger India-China relationship, they seem to be showing signs of wanting better relations. Well, we have to trust but verify, or rather verify and then think about trusting when it comes to China, because of the past 70 years of history, starting from the 1950s, in which we have, the Chinese have been extremely aggressive, and they have wanted to break up India. They have generals and writers who have written about the need to balkanize India. They've supported anti-India separatist activities in India's Far East, in Nagaland and other places. And, the whole history. There's been war, 1962, 1987 with China lost, 1967 with China lost, and so on. So there's this whole baggage of history that we have. And then there's the enormous undemarcated border, which obviously is the source of a lot of tension between India and China. So all of that is there, but the Chinese are showing signs of wanting things to become more normal, more normalization with India, maybe a détente, maybe a rapprochement or whatever. So we have to be very cautious when it comes to this. We have to take it one step at a time, very slowly proceed forward. And at the end of the day, the resolution to the entire issue is the demarcation of the border, but that's very far away. Until that's not done, things could blow up anytime, essentially. So there's been some pullback from both sides on the border, on the LAC, line of actual control. But we're going to have to be very cautious when it comes to our relationship with China. Maybe, and it's very clear that because of the tremendous pressure they're facing from the US, that's why they want a better relationship with India. Because if India also decides that let's give up and die and become a US vassal, then it's very bad news for China, right? So that's why the Chinese seem to want a better relationship with India, but we're going to have to be very cautious about that. The sudden virus outbreaks, reports of that in China, well, we have to keep an eye on that. I hope there's nothing serious. I don't think anybody in the world wants a repeat of what happened a few years ago. We don't want any of that again. I mean, that was devastating for the world. It was devastating for entire economies, for individuals, for families. We don't want that again. So I hope the Chinese government can control any potential virus outbreak, any future virus outbreak. I don't know if these could be deliberate disruptions. Can't speculate. But India is going to have to be very cautious when it comes to China. We should, if the Chinese are sincere in wanting better relations, we should very much welcome that. We have no civilizational or cultural or religious issues with China. It's just a border thing. Uh, so we should welcome Chinese intentions if they are sincere, and we should take it step by step, one step at a time. And I think that process is kind of happening. So it's by doing this confidence building measures and people to people connections and blah blah blah, all that stuff, that we could build more trust and hopefully ensure stability going forward in the long run. Okay, Vikramaditya Rathore and geopolitical Dubai. I recently read an article confirming Indonesia's entry into BRICS. While we see many nations apply for the BRICS membership, I wonder how long will the bloc survive and be relevant, considering there's no consensus between the top three nations, India, Russia, and China, with respect to issues like de-dollarization and so on. China wants to use an alternative BRICS currency to further its national interest and grow its economy, which can be a threat for India. If China grows stronger, isn't it a threat for Russia as well? How do you see the future of this bloc in the coming decades? And can RIC, Russia, India, China, this trilateral bloc, if formed officially, can RIC handle the sole superpower, which is the US? Is the US Is the US powerful enough to counter the RIC together? Is the US immune to any threat? Okay, let's first talk about BRICS, then we'll talk about RIC. But the two questions are definitely correlated. So Indonesia has apparently entered into BRICS. I haven't seen the news, but let's say it's true. Okay, or why don't we just Google it? So let's Google it. Okay, one second. Let us Google it. Indonesia BRICS. Indonesia defense branch. Okay, it has officially become the first Southeast Asian. Okay, all right. So it's clear that Indonesia has indeed joined BRICS. Very good. I'm happy to hear this. So a lot of nations want to join BRICS. You're right, and you're also right in asking how long could this bloc survive and be relevant, because there's no significant consensus between the top three nations, Russia, India, China. On various matters. So now we have to understand, why was this grouping formed in the first place? It was created as an economic grouping. See, the West has been dominant the past 5 centuries. And now there are the older economies, the older civilizations are rising again, India and China essentially. Russia is also an Eastern civilization, not Western. So it's kind of the East coming together in some sort of way to try and find some way to cooperate economically. There's a BRICS Bank, BRICS Development Bank, and so on. There's various organs or organizations that have been set up to take this cooperation forward. to act as vehicles that take this cooperation forward. So BRICS is kind of it is definitely not a strategic alliance. It's not a military alliance. It's not even an alliance. It's just a coalition of nations, and it's an economic coalition of nations. And you could say, sort of, that it emerged as a response to the Western hegemony of the world for 5 centuries. In reaction to the Western hegemony, that's the context, and in reaction to India, China, Russia again re-emerging as powers. So when it comes to economics, China is the biggest economy of the three RIC, of the BRICS economies. India is the second largest of the BRICS economies, and Russia is probably the third largest. If you cut out lots of extraneous factors and look at just the bare bones definition of GDP, then Russia could be in the top three. There you have that, right? So there are issues, of course, like you say, between India and China, between China and Russia, and so on. And obviously, the Chinese, every nation wants. Look, every nation prioritizes its own self-interest. When you're in BRICS, you want to extract some value out of BRICS for your own self-interest, and every nation sees BRICS in this way. So it can only work when there's synergy between the top three nations. So how long could BRICS last? I think BRICS will last significantly long because there is a common adversary or threat when it comes to economics and other matters, vis-a-vis, with respect from the perspective of the East. So when it comes to Russia, India, China, we have a common adversary of sorts. Well, from the Indian perspective, you could not really say that the US is an adversary, but their actions are anything but friendly. And their actions have been anything but friendly in the past 3 or 4 years. The US. They've used all kinds of pressure tactics against India. They've tried to tarnish India's image in so many different ways. They've tried to arm twist India in so many ways. They're currently arm twisting India when it comes to delivery of fighter jet engines and so many other things. So the relationship isn't good anymore between India and the US. And it's because India's status as a growing economy, and the US doesn't want India to end up becoming the next China in the next 20, 30 years. So that's why they're trying to clamp down from right now itself. So that's why you could say that the US is behaving like an adversary to India. So from that perspective, India, China, Russia have kind of common ground to work towards, right? So as long as the US is a hegemon, a global hegemon, a superpower, a very powerful nation, BRICS will continue to exist. Unless there's a war, very unlikely war between India and China, or China and Russia, which is extremely unlikely. I mean, how stupid it would be for India and China to go to war, or China and Russia to go to war. India and Russia, there's no chance of a war, no chance in hell of a war. But China, India, and China, Russia are the historical flashpoints. But it makes sense for these countries to work together. So I see BRICS remaining relevant for a few decades at least. At least a decade. 100% a decade, and it's really attractive. The BRICS economy, cumulative economy, is greater than the G7 economies now, which is why nations are really interested in joining. That's why Indonesia wants to join, and so many other nations want to join. They're all queuing up, so it makes sense. So I think BRICS will remain relevant for a few decades. Now about RIC. If RIC actually becomes a military coalition, let's say, okay, well, that's like hell freezing over, or the sun rising in the east. But let's say RIC becomes a military coalition, an actual military alliance. Then can it handle the sole superpower? You understand, if you want to become a military alliance, you have to work out all kinds of extremely complicated and confounding details. If we are a military alliance, do we pool our armed forces together? Who controls the armed forces? Who commands the armed forces? Where does the command center lie? A lot of details that are extremely prickly. But let's say it happens. Okay, so what that means is that you simply take the hard power score of each of the three nations and add it together into a single hard power score. So what Russia is about, what is it? Let's say it's 50. China is 17 and India is 4.9. So 60 plus 17 is 77 plus 4.9 is 81, 82. And the US is about 94. So that makes it very similar to the US. You know, the hard power of RIC plus versus US, it's still less than the US, but it is not far away. So it's 84 versus 82 versus 94, just a difference of 12 points. So that would make it a significant challenger to the US. But it would need to have a single uh, power center. You can't have decentralized power centers. Otherwise, if you have that, then it doesn't work properly. You don't have the agility and the speed of decision making that you would want. You would have to do decisions by consensus, which never works. Uh, so if RIC is formed, then it could really genuinely counterbalance the US. The US is still going to be more powerful than RIC put together, but it will be a genuine means of counterbalancing the US, and it would genuinely split the world essentially in half. So yeah, RIC, if it comes together, very unlikely, extremely unlikely, but if it happens, then it could genuinely counterbalance the US from a position of slight inferiority. Is the US immune to any threat? No nation is immune to any threat. No superpower is immune to threats. Right? Even the Roman Empire wasn't immune to threats. Even the Maurya Empire wasn't immune to threats. No geopolitical entity is immune entirely to threats. Pranay Paul says, is China's decision to stage the Ramayana promote Bharatanatyam among children as shared by Yu Jing, the spokesperson of the Chinese embassy in India, and the Chinese ambassador to India extending warm greetings on World Hindi Day 2025 with a video on X? Are all these things signs of genuine long-term cultural alignment, or is this a calculated strategic move considering China's demographic and financial challenges? Look, culturally, India and China have been aligned for a very long time, 2000 years plus. The Chinese Communist Party took Chinese culture in a very different direction. They tried to kind of stamp out old culture, old Chinese culture. But of late, they have realized the folly of doing so. And now they are trying to use China's culture as something that augments China's power, soft power worldwide, and China's image and all that. But when it comes to the Chinese Communist Party, culture is a means to an end. It's not the end itself. The Chinese Communist Party's overall objective is domination. It's expansion of their power. Essentially, China becomes the center of heaven, the Middle Kingdom, right? That's been their original goal. Right now, they understand it's very, very difficult to make it happen anytime soon. So right now, they have toned down the rhetoric and all that. But overall, that's always been the Chinese Communist Party's agenda. Now, India and China culturally, we align. There's no issue with our culture. There's no cultural issues that we have with China like we have with the Western world or any other part of the world. Our cultures are very compatible, India and China. Indian culture is not compatible with with Abrahamic culture, which is supremacist and expansionist and destructive. But India and China's cultures are very compatible. So there is definitely cultural alignment. There's no question about it. And the Chinese have no issue with Indian culture, and they will definitely see this as low-hanging fruit. So saying some nice things about India on World Hindi Day, maybe having some programs on World Yoga Day, Chinese people doing yoga, thousands of them, looks very nice. Indians are very easy to make Indians happy. Stage the Ramayana, have plays of the Ramayana conducted in China, promote Bharatanatyam among children. It doesn't harm China any way at all by doing these things. It is not a threat to Chinese civilization or culture doing any of this. But they will definitely clamp down on Christianity and Islam in China. But they are okay with Hinduism because we are compatible cultures. So that is fine. So the Chinese are doing that. And by doing these things, the Chinese are signaling to India that we desire better relations. That's what they are signaling to India. How sincere are they is to be seen. But one can be optimistic and say that maybe the Chinese are sincere. So let's take it one step at a time. Let's meet and see what they seek and see what we seek, and let's see what's common in between these two things, and let's work together towards that, and we'll see one step at a time how sincere they are, and they can also see how sincere we are, and that's how you go forward in diplomacy and in international relations. So it's definitely something we can do. Is this a calculated strategic move considering China's various challenges? Definitely, it is that as well. It is that as well, right? Right now, the whole world's economy is shutting down. It's shutting its doors to Chinese imports by putting up these trade and tariff barriers. So where does China export all of its goods? It is the world's largest manufacturing capacity. But where does it export everything? Without the export, the Chinese economy dies. So by bettering relations with India, they're hoping that they can get access to the Indian economy, and then India and China's trade can really go up, and that's what they seek. So they you know the past few years the Indian economy is completely shut down to the Chinese. There's still trade going on. I mean, India is exporting raw materials and importing Chinese finished products because India has failed in becoming manufacturing power past 10 years. I don't know what happened, but it's not happened. So there's this big trade imbalance, and if the Chinese get access to the Indian market, the trade imbalance could get worse. But yeah, that is the deal. So it's definitely related, linked to the Chinese, to the challenges the Chinese are facing, the geopolitical, demographic, financial, economic challenges the Chinese are facing, and for that they need to have better relations with India. It makes sense from a strategic perspective. So that's why they're doing all this, and it's okay. We know why they're doing it, but if it leads to better relations, it's good for us as well. So we should take it one step at a time, very cautiously, but we can be optimistic. Dhanush and Vikram geopolitical. The dry variant of the Kaveri engine for the Ghatak aircraft has been approved for testing, and reports are saying that the engine could be in production by 2026. Given this news, is there a good chance that we may be able to succeed with the Kaveri program so that we don't have to depend on buying the technology from other nations? DRDO has announced that the Kaveri engine has been cleared for in-flight testing, marking a significant development in so on and so forth. The testing location will be the Gromov Flight Research Institute located near Moscow, Russia. How big of a development is this? It's a good development. It's a positive development. Please understand that this is not the full version of the Kaveri engine. This is the dry variant of the Kaveri engine. What is the difference between a dry variant and a wet variant? The dry variant of an engine is an engine that doesn't have afterburners, and the wet variant of an engine is a version of the engine that can ignite afterburners that give a significant short-term boost to the fighter plane. So afterburners are when a plane is taking off. Okay, let's just Google it instead of describing it theoretically. Let us Google it. So afterburners, afterburner. So this is what afterburners look like. When a plane is taking off, it puts out this big jet, long jet. Over here, you can see it, and you can see shock diamonds or mark diamonds in the afterburner images, right? So generally, when a plane is flying, you will not see this exhaust, this exhaust on fire behind it. So this is used only when you're taking off or when you want to suddenly acquire a very rapid burst of speed in a very short time. That's when you use the afterburner. When you use the afterburner, it consumes a lot of fuel, a lot more of fuel than it otherwise would consume. So it's only for takeoffs and dog fighting and all that you use afterburners, and that's something that you need in a fighter plane. Without afterburners, you are like kind of handicapped. Uh, so the dry version of the Kaveri engine doesn't have afterburner capability. So it's not the final version of the engine that you want to use in your fighter planes. It's kind of a reduced version. But anyway, it's good progress. It's going to be used for the Ghatak aircraft, which is a bat-shaped aircraft. It's a stealth aircraft, unmanned aircraft that India is developing. So it's a good step. It's good progress. My question is, why don't we have testing facilities in India? Are we a nation that lacks money or resources? Why is the government of India? Why have they been sleeping on this so long? Why don't we have our own flight testing facilities, testing facilities? You need a test bed for that. A test bed is essentially an aircraft with Generally you have a four engine aircraft like a 747 or one of the various military transport planes, huge ones with four engines, and one of those four engines is taken out and it's replaced by the engine you want to test. So even if the engine malfunctions, you still have three functioning engines and the plane will survive no matter what happens in the test. So that's a test bed. Why doesn't India have a single test bed? Why hasn't the government of India invested in a single test bed? Why don't we have flight testing capabilities? Why do we have to send an engine to Russia for this? This tells you why India doesn't do well in these matters. We are simply not serious about these things. We're going to outsource everything to others. Um, yeah, so that's a sad state of affairs that we have in India. And people say that you are very negative. Well, these are facts, right? Uh, yeah, so that's the deal. So it's an incremental development. It's not going to be powerful enough, this engine, for the Tejas fighter plane or future fighter planes, AMC or whatever. For that to happen, you would need a wet variant of the Kaveri engine with full afterburner capabilities. But I'm glad the dry variant is being tested, and hopefully it does well. And by 26, we can use it in our unmanned aircraft like the Ghatak and so on. So it's incremental progress. But we really, really need to have our own full-fledged jet engine for fighter planes, no matter what it takes, no matter what it costs. Pranay Paul says, with the IAF chief, Indian Air Force chief, highlighting frustration over the sluggish pace of Tejas production, stating that tech delayed is tech denied, and increased militarization by China and Pakistan posing serious security concerns. How can India strike a balance between speeding up indigenous defense projects and addressing immediate border challenges? Look, when it comes to border challenges, you put the right amount, the requisite amount of personnel and materials on the border. You deploy that properly. You need to have border infrastructure like roads and railways and all, which we are doing. I am very pleased with the way the government has gone about doing that. Excellent job. The Border Roads Organization has been working day and night. No matter what the climate is like, no matter whether it's raining or snowing or whatever, they've been working day and night. So, great progress on this front. India has really caught up with the Chinese infrastructure on various portions of the India Tibet border. So that's great work. You got to hand it to the government. Great job on that. So we need to leverage that and place the right amount of men and material on the border to deal with the border challenges. But when it comes to the technological challenges and capabilities, the Chinese now have two fifth generation fighter planes, and they could transfer some of these or sell some of these to Pakistan, which will give us a tremendous headache, right? From two flanks, a two front headache. Uh, Now the Chinese are making noises that they want to be friends with India again. Well, I'm glad they're doing it, but we still cannot discount the fact that they are a very powerful nation, and we have this whole history of hostility. So India needs to have something to counter all that, and for that we need to produce to take these programs forward, the AMCA program and whatever else, the advanced medium combat aircraft, the twin engine deck based fighter TEDBF, and so on and so forth, whatever is there. We need to really step up the gas on these things. But now, when it comes to the Tejas fighter planes, the IAF chief said that orders that were placed in 2010 still haven't been delivered, which is shocking. So, what should be done? We can sit here and cry and criticize and point fingers, but what should be done? DRDO needs to be overhauled. DRDO is an extremely outdated bureaucratic organization. 5,000 scientists and engineers and 25 to 30,000 non-scientific personnel. Why do you need 25 to 30,000 non-science personnel in DRDO? Fire them all, lay them off, transfer them somewhere else. Imagine how much salary they're drawing every month. Much of the scientific budget is going towards paying these people's salaries. We need to cut down on all this nonsense. And DRDO, I mean, they've done a lot of good work, not great work, but good work. But they can do more. They can do better. They have a similar budget as DARPA. DARPA has just twice the budget as DRDO, not 10 times, not 50 times, not 100 times, just twice the budget as DRDO. And see what the American DARPA can do. The most spectacular technological achievements. And the DARPA, and when it comes to DARPA, you know how many people they have on their payroll at any given point in time? 150 scientists or engineers. That's it. We have 5,000 scientists or engineers in DRDO and 25 to 30,000 non-scientific personnel. I don't know what those people are doing. So we need to cut down all this nonsense. The government knows this. I first said this in 2019 or something in Pondicherry, right? It's been what, 6 years, 5 years? We need to cut down on all this, really. We need to make these organizations lean and mean, and everything should be based on performance. If you don't perform, you should be fired, right? So the DRDO has these Tejas production lines. So apparently we can produce 16 Tejas fighters in a year. Why only 16? Why not make 2 or 3 more production lines and ramp up the production to at least 32 or maybe 50 per year? Why not do that? Don't we have the money to set up more production lines? Don't we have 1.4 billion people in India who are thirsting for jobs and who will work on the production lines? And they're all qualified. They all have the degrees. Why not do this? What is preventing us from doing it? Am I criticizing the government too much? Am I being unjust in my criticism? So all this can be done. And at the end of the day, the Kaveri engine has to work. Or just buy a jet engine. I don't care how much they charge for it. Get a full transfer of technology. What's 5 billion, 10 billion? What is it? It's nothing for India. Cut down on your Ladli Behan Yojana or what, or this Yojana or that Yojana. Cut down on all these things. Freebies, free apartments for people, I don't know what the hell, slum dwellers. Why do we even need slums? Send them back to the village and and set up the right environment in all villages for people to get employment there. So there are so many issues. There are clear-cut solutions to the issues, but who's going to implement them? Vikram Geopolitical says, why didn't India buy the 5th generation Sukhoi 57 from Russia instead of going for the 4.5 generation Rafale? Russia is a friend of ours. They could have agreed. Of course, they'll agree today if we want. They'll agree today if we want. So India and Russia were working on the 5th generation fighter aircraft, the FGFA project, which was an aircraft that's a derivative of the Sukhoi 57. So India and Russia, this project started, I don't know, maybe around 2010. Maybe give or take a few years, but roughly 2010. Don't quote me on that. Look it up on Wikipedia or wherever. So around 2010, this joint venture starts, the FGFA project, which is going to be a new aircraft based on the Sukhoi 57. And India wants it to be a twin pilot aircraft. The Sukhoi 57 has one pilot. We want a 2-pilot aircraft. And we want some changes, some improvements to the Su-57 fighter plane. Some 50 plus improvements India wanted. More stealth capabilities, more this, more that, this, that. And this was supposed to be a joint venture, means half the work is done by Russia or half the work is done by India. And at the end of the day, there'll be a full technology transfer to India. And India will pay a significant amount of money for that. And over time, India found that it was not getting what it was paying for. India was footing much of the bill, but India was not getting the technology transfer. Most of the critical design, etc., work was being done in Russia, and they were reluctant to hand over the blueprints and the technology and all that. And then around 2017, 2018, the Russians asked for what, $9 billion or something. So they said, you want the technology, it's going to cost some more. I would say India should have handed over the $9 billion and taken the full technology transfer. But India discontinued the project. Maybe there have been good reasons for it. Okay, I can only tell you what is available in the public domain. I'm sure there's a lot that's classified and that we do not know about. So maybe some things happened that were not right for us. Maybe not. I don't know. So we withdrew from the project after sinking a lot of money into the project. And the Russians have said that India is welcome to restart the project at any time. India said that we will think about it after the Sukhoi 57 is actually deployed. So now it's deployed. So is India thinking about it or not? I don't know. I would say that, look, the Sukhoi 57 is a 5th generation fighter plane. I'm sure it's not as stealthy as the world's stealthiest aircraft like we wanted, but I'm sure it's stealthier than the Rafale. And it has capabilities that the Rafale doesn't have as a 4.5 generation fighter plane. So, was it a good decision to abandon the joint project with the Russians? We wanted a super Sukhoi 57. We wanted a Sukhoi 57 with like 57 or something, 54, 50 plus improvements on the Sukhoi 57. Two pilots instead of one, uh, avionics same, but more stealth features, the all kinds of stuff. Okay, all kinds of extra improvements. So I would say that even if we get zero improvements, but we get the technology transfer of the Sukhoi 57 as it is today, and we have to pay $9 billion for it, we should do it. We should do it. So I don't get what the armed forces brass want. They want the best of everything. At the end of the day, you have what? MiG 21s and Jaguars and Sukhoi 30s and some Rafales, a handful, small handful, like salt, sprinkling of Rafales. Why not have 200, 300 Sukhoi 57s that you can build on your own because you have the technology? Why not do that? Pay the money, right? I don't know what goes on, what considerations are there, what calculations are there. Maybe the Russians possibly were not willing to give the full technology even after paying $9 million. That's also a possibility. So it would be unfair to criticize the government entirely without knowing the full details, and the full details are obviously classified, so we don't know. But I would say that compared to the Rafale, see, the Rafale is a great aircraft, but the Sukhoi 57, at least on paper from what I see, is a much better aircraft. It's a fifth generation fighter plane. It would make sense for us to have a few hundred of those. That would seriously, ease the pressure on India when it comes to the Chinese developments and the potential sale of Chinese fifth generation fighter planes to Pakistan. It would be great for India to have 200 or 300 Sukhoi 57s with production lines in India, with the full technology transfer in India. Whatever it costs, I don't care. It's a matter of national security. In the meanwhile, we can continue building, developing the fifth generation fighter plane, the AMCA, the TDBF, and all that. We can continue work on those things. But we should at least get one fifth generation fighter plane now. So, yeah, that's where we are. Vikram Geopolitics says, how will India-Canada relations evolve after Justin Trudeau stepped down as the Prime Minister of Canada? Yes, Monsieur Justin Trudeau has stepped down as the Prime Minister of Canada. I think he decided that I have done enough damage to the world and now I will step down. So now that he's gone and somebody new will eventually be placed in power as the Prime Minister of Canada, how will India-Canada relations evolve? Okay, here's the deal when it comes to India-Canada relations. Canada harbors a very rabid, very hostile Khalistani population. These are Canadian citizens who espouse the fictitious La La Land dream of Khalistan, creating Khalistan out of Indian territory. They don't want to create Khalistan out of Pakistani territory, Pakistani occupied Punjab. They don't want that. They want it to be carved out of Indian Punjab. These are anti-India elements. They call for the assassination of Indian diplomats, prime ministers. They celebrate the assassination of Prime Minister Indira Gandhi's, her assassination. They are the ones who blew up an entire aircraft once. The Canadian government just, they pushed that into investigation under the carpet. So as long as this situation continues, and as long as these Khalistani terrorists keep getting political mileage and support from all the Canadian political parties, India-Canada relations will never go back on track. And the onus for this lies on Canada, not on India. We don't harbor those Khalistanis. The Canadians are harboring the Khalistanis and various assorted anti-India elements. So as long as Canada does this, India Canada relations cannot go back on track. It's as simple as that. Whether it's Justin Trudeau who's prime minister, or Pierre Poilievre who's prime minister, or whoever else is prime minister, it doesn't matter. As long as their political system continues to support the Khalistanis and make them an integral part of their politics, things won't work. So I don't see any improvement, any significant improvement in India Canada relations anytime soon. Vikramaditya Rathore says, as Trump returns to power, can we see IMEC corridor resume sometime this year? Because Trump has threatened Hamas to return all the hostages, otherwise there'll be hell unleashed. Yes, as we know, he has good ties with Israel, and he was pretty tough on Iran in his last term, and will back Israel till it fulfills its objectives. And also in the IMEC, there are other allies like Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. Chances are war might end this year. What are your views about this? Good question, very interesting question. Let's go to the map to understand the situation with the IMEC. So let's go to the map. So what is this IMEC? The IMEC is the India, Middle East, Europe corridor. It's a trade and transportation corridor. It will start, one of its terminals will be the entire west coast of India. I think Mumbai is one of the major ports. And from Mumbai, you go to the UAE. There will be a port somewhere in the northern part of the UAE, okay, which is going to be one of the major points in the IMEC. From the UAE, the corridor goes on via land across Saudi Arabia, which means that Saudi Arabia will have to construct railway and road lines, which is very feasible. I mean, there are some engineering challenges in the Saudi Arabian desert, but it's certainly something that can be done. So it continues within Saudi Arabia, and then it crosses over into Jordan, from Jordan into Israel, the port of Haifa that the Adani group owns or controls. There is that. And from Israel, so from Saudi Arabia through Jordan into Israel, and from Israel to Cyprus and Greece. Cyprus may or may not be there, but Greece will definitely be there. The port city of Piraeus. Where is the port of Piraeus? Do we need to... Okay, the port of Piraeus is somewhere here in Greece. Somewhere here. But okay, it doesn't matter. Let's not waste time zooming into the map. But from India into the UAE, from UAE via Saudi Arabia, via Jordan into Israel, and from Israel, bypassing Turkey, you go to Greece and probably to Rome, etc. And there could be some points, some transit points in North Africa as well. And what this does is that it gives the US and India an option that is an addition to the option that we have in Suez, the Suez Canal. The Suez Canal is a very important choke point, and it involves another choke point in the Bab al-Mandeb Strait over here, north of Djibouti. And there's been this issue with the Houthis targeting shipping through this region. So if we do this, then we will have an alternative to the Suez Canal. So it's great for India, it's great for the nations of the West Asia region, it's great for Europe, it's great for the US. So this plan was announced during the G20 summit in Delhi in 2023. And just after this was announced, the terrorist attack on Israel happened, October 7th. The Hamas terrorist attack, and that completely scuttled the project. The Saudis wanted this project to start operations within a week or two after it was signed, but it's now been more than a year. So that's what IMEC is, and that's why it's important. Now, what happens? Now the question is, will Trump make it happen? Look, Hamas has been thoroughly blasted and battered, and their leadership has been wiped out to a large extent. So if the Israelis are able to, for want of a better term, pacify Gaza and the West Bank properly, and there's no more chance of any conflict in the region, especially Gaza and the Middle East and the West Bank, then IMEC could go ahead. It could certainly go ahead. It remains to be seen what the situation with Iran is and how it evolves this year, because that's another unresolved issue. The Iran-Israel hostility and the back and forth missile and other attacks that happened last year. So if the situation remains peaceful, IMEC could certainly go ahead this year. And it would be good for the economy of India, for the economies of Europe, and of course the nations in the West Asia region, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Israel as well. So it would be great if this project goes ahead this year. It depends on whether the Israelis are able to properly ensure peace in their region, and whether there is any hostility that continues between Israel and Iran. And if the US gets involved, then it's going to destabilize the region all over again. So it depends on all these factors. Vishal Kumar says recently lots of articles are coming on the link between the Indus script and Hindu culture, but on the parallel there's an attempt to link the script with Dravidian origins, as the Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu has approved a fund for the decipherment of the Indus script, and we have found giraffes in South India with matches the Sindhu Ghati Sabhyata. What do you think about that? Okay, so the so the Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu has announced a prize for the decipherment of the Indus Valley or Harappan or Saraswati Sindhu script. Yeah. Whether it's a prize or a fund, I'm not sure, but it's a prize, I think, right? Now, the fact is that the script has been deciphered. The script has been deciphered. It has been deciphered by a gentleman called Yajnadevam, Mr. Bharat Rao. He has deciphered it. And soon you will be able to read the Indus script like you read Hindi, ka, kha, ga, ga, all that stuff with the Indus script symbols. So it's done. Now they can keep on trying to redecipher it into and claim it's this or that or whatever. But what Yajnadevam has discovered is that it is Sanskrit. And announcement coming up soon. This comes up soon. This. Right? That is the gentleman, Yajnadevam, Mr. Bharat Rao, who deciphered the script. So I have recorded a podcast with him in which we go into the whole detail. We go into the decipherment in great detail. And it's coming up next week. So please look forward to it. It comes up next week and the script is deciphered. So let people put up prizes and whatever and funds for decipherment, but it is done. It is done and it is done conclusively. So the Saraswati Sindhu script was Sanskrit. I mean, it encoded the Sanskrit language. It can encode any language. Any script can encode any language. But the language it encoded was Sanskrit. That's done. Now, the acceptance of a decipherment can take time. It can take years. It can take decades. But if the decipherment is correct, at the end of the day, you're going to have to agree with it. And this decipherment is correct. So the script is deciphered and the podcast comes out next week and you can listen to it and understand how it was done. Prakhar Gupta says, many historians claim that ancient Indian mathematics and astronomy were the result of the introduction of Greek influence after Alexander and the Indo-Greek era. So before Alexander, there was no mathematics and astronomy in India, right? Because many of the great mathematicians and historians like Aryabhatta and Brahmagupta lived after the Indo-Greek era. What are the facts? Okay, Brahmagupta lived in the 6th century AD. Aryabhatta is said to have lived somewhere in the first half of the first millennium AD and so on. And so on. Now let's understand some chronology. Alexander comes to India about 320 something BC, right? 327 or something BC. Before that, was there no scientific technological advancement in India? Were we living in straw and grass huts? Were we living on the trees? Were we eating raw meat? Did we have no civilization in India before Alexander? Is that the case? We had the Saraswati Sindhu phase of Indian civilization, of Indian history. So let's look at it chronologically. If we look at Greece, the oldest historical era of Greece was Mycenaean Greece, which is about 1750 BC to about 1000 BC. Mycenaean Greece. But that's not the classical ancient Greece. The classical ancient Greece is about 1000 BC to about 1 AD, or until the Roman conquest of Greece, which is before 1 AD, which is a few years before 1 AD. It was done by Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. So they conquer Greece, and after that, Greece is permanently subjugated. So ancient Greece was roughly 1000 BC to whenever Julius Caesar conquered Greece. And before ancient Greece, you had another period, which was Mycenaean Greece, which was 1750 BC to 1000 BC. Now, Greek mathematics and whatever science, etc., that's in the ancient Greece period, which is about 1000 BC to about, let's say, about 50 BC. That's when all of that happened. The city states and so-called democracy and the Peloponnesian War and technological advances, the hoplites, the cavalry, um, and whatever science and mathematics and astronomy the Greeks came up with. All of that is from 1000 BC to about 50 BC. Okay. Now, when it comes to Indian history, the Saraswati Sindhu civilization phase of Indian history, the oldest Sindhu settlement that we have found thus far is Birana in Haryana, which goes back to 7500 BC. It's about 10,000 years before today. Compare that with 1750 BC of Greece. Now, the so-called early Harappan phase is about 3500 BC, and the mature Harappan phase is 2600 BC. During the mature Harappan phase, 2600 BC or thereabouts, you have tremendous technological advancements in India. It is a fully urbanized civilization. You have standardization of weights and measures. You have multi-storied buildings. You have enormous harbors. The harbors at Lothal and Dholavira. One of these two harbors is larger than the modern harbor at Vishakhapatnam, where the Indian aircraft carriers can be accommodated. So our Harappan era ancestors built harbors that could accommodate today's aircraft carriers. You had tremendous feats of hydro engineering and whatnot. Do you think you can have these accomplishments without a knowledge of science, technology, mathematics, etc.? And all of this is way before Greece was even dreamt of in somebody's mind. So if you look at the facts on the ground, it completely contradicts these claims by whatever historians that Indian mathematics and astronomy were the result of the introduction of all this by the Greeks. What utter nonsense. The Greeks were primitives compared to India. I mean no disrespect to our Greek friends, but India predates Greece by thousands of years, by at least 5,000 years. That's just a fact, right? So, yeah, Brahmagupta lived recently, Aryabhatta lived recently. In the context of the entirety of Indian history, these guys lived recently. It's like day before yesterday. But that's how old Indian history is. So, if you just look at the fact that we have such an incredibly technologically advanced phase of Indian history, about 3000, 4000 BC, way before Greece, it tells you that we obviously had tremendous advancements in mathematics and technology and astronomy. Okay, mathematics and technology long before Greece. When it comes to astronomy, we have been recording astronomical events for thousands of years. Where is that? Let me Google that and put it up. Okay, supernova, Kashmir. Okay, so let's put this up on the screen. Our ancestors have been recording celestial events, astronomical events for thousands of years. So here's this article by The Guardian. Let's see the Guardian article. Two suns? No. It's a supernova drawn to 6,000 years ago, say scientists. So this stone carving from Kashmir's Burza Hama site was thought to depict a hunting scene for decades. But now, Indian researchers have discovered that this is the oldest depiction of a dying star. There are essentially two suns in the carving, and there's a hunter, and there's a deer, and there's a dog, and so on. And this actually represents a sky chart, a chart with constellations and the location of the sun and the location of a star that exploded. And if you use astronomical software and you try to find when was the last time a supernova happened in this region, you have to go back about 6,000 years before today. It's supernova HB9 that exploded about 4,600 BC. So we have been recording astronomical events from 4,600 BC, thousands and thousands of years, 7,000 years. Our calendar. So when the Greeks came to India, the Greek the Greek ambassador Megasthenes, who was based in Patliputra, the Mauryan court, he said that the Indians have this calendar called the Saptarshi calendar that dates back to 6,000 something years before today. So if you have a calendar that goes back 6 7,000 years, calendars are based on observations of cycles of solar, lunar, and astronomical cycles. And we had a calendar that went back 6 7,000 years. So to claim that we had no understanding of astronomy, you cannot have a calendar, uh, even a rudimentary calendar, without a decent understanding of astronomy. And we had a great calendar. So all these claims, when you look at them factually, they evaporate into nothingness. Muscovite says, could you consider recording a coherent series of videos about Indian history from the very beginning up to the present day? Since it's a huge and complicated topic, it's hard to find a reliable source, not of colonial origin or without colonial influence, with a decent vision and approach you have, or at least you can recommend some books. But a series of videos is still needed anyway, because most people don't read books. I know. I'm sure it'll be very useful not only for amicable interested outsiders like me, but for fellow Indians as well. Greetings from Mother Russia. Okay, I've just found out you have a course. Do you have any plans to continue and make it open for the wider audience in YouTube? And could you add a crypto payment option in USDT, for example? Well, first of all, greetings to our friend from Moscow. Look, I am currently doing a series on US history. It's just begun. It's a long journey. If I were to do a series of videos on Indian history, put them out once a week or so, that would be an even longer journey, and it would be a very, very, very large undertaking to do it properly in detail. It would involve a lot of reading, a lot of research, a lot of outlining, and so on. It's certainly something I could do, but it's not something I can do right away. It will take me some time before I can undertake such a project. But it's certainly a very worthwhile project, and I'm really, really glad that people from outside India, especially our friends from Russia, are interested in this. I could try and see whether I could add a crypto payment option, USDT, etc., on the course. That's what I could do right away. But thank you for the suggestion. It's something I would really love to do in the future, but it won't happen right away because right now I am busy in other projects. But yeah, eventually it should happen. Me or somebody else or whoever, maybe me. Once this current project is over, I could probably take this up. So thank you for the suggestion. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it, and thank you for your viewership. Really, really appreciate it. Best wishes. Sanjeev says the US is using Pakistan against India, and on the other side, why is the US supporting the Afghan Taliban, who are destabilizing Pakistan? Does the US have any future plan to use Taliban against India? Okay, interesting question. Look, okay, we know the US has historically used Pakistan to destabilize India, to counterbalance India. The Americans in the 1970s, 80s, 90s, 2000s funded and financed Pakistani terrorism against India. The Pakistanis were doing it, but it was funded by the Americans. We know that. The Kashmir Hindu exodus, all of that was funded and financed and maybe masterminded by the Americans. At least funded and financed. So yes, so Pakistan is their attack dog against India. It's historically been that way. Now India is too big for that to be effective, but it still is a destabilizing factor, Pakistan. And it's a US vassal. We know that, right? Ever since Imran Khan was ousted and whoever came to power, it's a US vassal. Now, it has also emerged of late. I mean, earlier I was the only person saying it, but now even Elon Musk has pointed fingers in that direction. And it's now known that the Americans have been funding the Taliban. It's now conclusively demonstrated. I've been saying this since 2021. So the Americans are paying the Taliban between 50 to 70 to maybe $100 million in cash every week. A lot of money, right? So why are the Americans supporting the Taliban, who are anti-Pakistan? Because Pakistan is supported by the US, right? Why do that? It's a very interesting geopolitical game. They will use Pakistan to counterbalance India, But just to make sure that the Pakistanis don't really become too overconfident, they will use Afghanistan as a counterbalance to Pakistan. So full balance. And Afghanistan being on the US payroll also has the effect of cutting off the Chinese Belt and Road initiative, which was hopefully supposed to go through Afghanistan, and it's not happening. So the Chinese want to invest in Afghanistan. They want to exploit Afghanistan's natural resources, mineral resources, copper from the Mes-Ainak region and whatnot, but it's not happening. Nothing is happening. Impossible to do. The Taliban is making it impossible for the Chinese to do anything. The Chinese would have loved to have the Belt and Road (OBOR) infrastructure project go via Afghanistan westwards, but that has also not happened. So by supporting the Afghan Taliban, the Americans are ensuring that they are essentially killing two birds with one stone. They are blocking the Chinese Belt and Road initiative. They are blocking Chinese access to Afghanistan. That's one bird. Second bird is Pakistan. They are keeping Pakistan under a tight leash, or at least a loosish leash. So the Taliban can be activated anytime the Pakistanis become overconfident. So yeah, that's the game that's being played. Does the US have any future plan to use Taliban against India? I don't think so. I don't think the Taliban will be amenable to fighting against India. The Taliban are Pashtun nationalists. All they want is to be left alone. Leave us alone. Leave us alone to govern our nation. We will impose Sharia. We'll do whatever we want. Leave us alone. That's all they want. They have no enmity with India. They have enmity with Pakistan because Pakistan squats on Afghan territory. The Khyber Pakhtunkhwa region is Pashtun majority from a population perspective, and the Pashtuns, they want to reunify with Afghanistan. So it's a huge territorial dispute. It's a long standing territorial dispute, and the Taliban wants that territory back from Pakistan. So Taliban, Pakistan, bad relations. They are adversaries. From Taliban's perspective, they have nothing against India. They have no love for India. Let's understand that. They have no love for India, but they don't have any enmity towards India either. India has done a tremendous amount of great work in Afghanistan the past several decades. So many infrastructure projects, agriculture projects that have helped the common man, woman, and child. India has not spent money lining the pockets of corrupt politicians in Afghanistan. India has spent billions of dollars creating infrastructure projects and agriculture projects. And these have all benefited the common person, including every single Taliban member's family members. So the Taliban have no desire to be hostile towards India. Somewhere in their heart, they have some degree of warmth towards India, but no love for India. So it's that sort of situation. So I don't think even if the US wants, they can use Taliban against India. If they want, they can use many of their other terrorist outfits, Al Qaeda, ISIS, whatever other terrorist outfits the Americans have created and funded. They can, if they want to use terrorism against India, they can use those. But the Taliban probably won't work for the US. Okay, Vikram Geopolitical asks two questions. My views on Hillary Clinton and George Soros getting the Medal of Freedom from Joe Biden, and Elon Musk condemns George Soros for funding Hamas supporting NGOs and said that the latter's hatred of humanity includes Israel. What are my thoughts? So we are right now witnessing a transition in US geopolitics. A transition, first of all, I think we all understand that there is some extra governmental, extra democratic power center that exists in the US. And they have been the guys who have been running the nation the past 4 years. Because the past 4 years, you had one person who was mentally not there, Joe Biden, too elderly to function normally. And you had Kamala Harris, who doesn't have the IQ required to be a vice president or a stand-in president. So neither the president nor the vice president were capable of leading the nation, but somebody was running the nation. So it becomes very clear that the US doesn't need a president. There's somebody running the nation at all times. And that's obviously the so-called deep state or whatever you want to call it. So I think it's it's completely, perfectly clear beyond any doubt that this situation does exist in the US. Now, so the deep state, They essentially control the US, and they control all the US vassals, and they control more than half the world. If it does exist, it looks very clear that it does exist. And they interfere in various nations, including their allies, including their enemies. They interfere in the affairs of every nation through various proxies. And so one of these proxies has been George Soros. Uh, I'll not go into his life and career and all that, but he has been a very destructive influence on various economies. He's destroyed economies of entire nations, and he runs all these so-called philanthropic organizations and all that interfere in the internal affairs of nations. And he's in his 90s now. His son is essentially taking over, and it is in recognition of a lifetime of service that he was given this honor by the deep state through the hands of Joe Biden. And now that his job is done and he's too old, he's going to be set aside, and his son may be allowed to run the show. But I think the focus will now be on other things. So they will not entirely dispense with the Soros gang, but they have new tools in the toolbox, the deep state. And so that's what we are seeing. We are seeing this transition right now. So they're thanking the old guard, Hillary Clinton, George Soros. Thank you for a job well done. Thank you for a lifetime of service. Now sit down, and if needed, we'll call upon you. But right now, you're kind of in cold storage, and now we have new toys and new tools to fight with. So that's why you see the new tool, Elon Musk, condemning George Soros. Right? So that's what we are witnessing. Look, Elon Musk is the new face of the deep state. Okay? Great guy. He has achieved so much. Very, very smart guy. He probably could end up being more powerful than the US president, even though he can't be the US president. Of course, if Trump annexes Canada, then Elon Musk will probably become a natural born US citizen, because or could perhaps be that way. If he's a Canadian citizen and then he became a US citizen, there could be some pathway for him to become US president. But but Elon Musk has played a great game. He's become the richest man in the world, maybe the most powerful man, maybe after or before the US president, we don't know. But yeah, and you cannot achieve that without being completely 100% aligned with the objectives and agenda of the deep state. So yeah, that's how I see it. Chingleng Khomba Yimlembam says, I am from Manipur and I have seen Burmese Chin Cookie roaming freely, planting poppy near Indian army camps, killing civilians at will. Indian army and Assam Rifles paramilitary force did nothing to them. What's your opinion on this? Furthermore, national media talks about foreign hand in Manipur, etc., foreign hand in the Manipur conflict, but I have never seen Chinese and US troops here. Instead I've seen Indian forces staying together with Burmese Cookie militants, supplying weapons and logistics to them, even signing suspension of Operation SOO agreement with the militants. So who's the foreign hand here? What's going on? See, the suspension of operations SOO agreement was signed by Mr. Chidambaram, the then Home Minister, I think, of the Congress Party in 2008. But you know what? 2008 was a long time ago. Mr. Modi has been Prime Minister of India for the past 10 plus years. So I think it's now there's no point now blaming the Congress Party and previous governments for what's happening in Manipur. You can't keep blaming them. So whatever is being said over here, I think it's impossible to refute. So I think, the Prime Minister has to answer these questions. I can't answer these questions. But the Prime Minister has decided to observe a vow of silence when it comes to Manipur. So I think, what can I say? Either the Prime Minister or the Home Minister, one of them is the right person to answer these questions, very factual questions. That's all I can say. Speak up, gentlemen. Vikramaditya Rathore says, as more and more nations develop hypersonic missiles, how long will defense systems like S-400, Patriot, etc. be relevant, considering the fact that these missiles are faster than sound and can't be intercepted by these systems? Is there any system in the R&D stage in the US, Russia, China, etc., which can neutralize these weapons in the future? See, here's the game. From an offensive perspective, I want to have the fastest and deadliest missile possible. From a defensive perspective, I want to have a system that can intercept my deadliest missile. The game is always to be one step ahead of the other, either from a defense perspective or from an offense perspective. From an offense perspective, you want to be one step ahead of the defenders. So if the best system in the world can neutralize or intercept Mach 2 missiles, then I want to be at Mach 3 or Mach 5. If the best defense system, missiles defense system, is capable of intercepting Mach 5 missiles, then I want to be at Mach 6 or Mach 7 or Mach 8, 9. Or from a defensive perspective, if the best and fastest missile in the world is Mach 9, then I want to develop a system that can neutralize and identify and intercept and neutralize Mach 10 missiles. So the game is to be one step ahead of the other. So right now, many nations are developing hypersonics. India is in the game. China is in the game. Russia has the best hypersonic missiles. The Iranians have hypersonic missiles. The Americans are obviously developing these things. So I think in this current climate, the S-400 is pretty much going to be obsolete when it comes to going toe-to-toe with the best missile systems. So when it comes to the Kinjal is a cruise missile. The Zircon is a ballistic missile, if I'm not mistaken, and there's others. So there's a Zircon, there's the Kinjal. The Kinjal is launched from aircraft. The Zircon may be a cruise missile, ballistic, but it has like Mach 9, the Zircon, and so on. It may even be Mach 10. So when it comes to the Zircon, for example, which let's say it's Mach 9, it can take out any aircraft carrier in the world. The UK's aircraft carriers are already obsolete. The two new ones are already obsolete. So if the Zircon missile is launched towards a target and the target has an S-400, the S-400 is helpless. That's a guarantee. So obviously, when it comes to the best missile systems right now, the S-400 will not be able to do much against them. The S-400 can take care of the majority of missile threats, not ballistic, but cruise missile threats and aircraft and all that. But when it comes to the cutting edge, the S-400 will fail. The Russians have an S-500 system that's already being deployed, which probably will be much better than the S-400. It can even take out ballistic missiles, medium range or whatever ballistic missiles. And soon they will need a S-600. So you always have to keep improving your capabilities, keep augmenting your capabilities. Just because you have the S-400, which is the best in the world, doesn't mean you can sit down and relax. You have to always keep, the moment this system is operational, you have to think about how do I make it better? And how do I take it to a whole new level, which is the S-500. So it's going to always be that game. The missile developers will try and their job is to make better and better missiles. I have a Mach 9 missile. Now I want to aim for Mach 11. You start the R&D process all over again. Better materials, better fuels, better heat signatures and whatnot. And so on. So that's the game. It's a never-ending game. Predator versus prey. See if there exist any systems that can neutralize such threats. Those systems will be extremely secret, highly classified. So we will not know about them, even if they exist. Sarika says, will India take the Muslims in POK inside India if India reclaims POK? If yes, it will affect Indian demography, internal security, Hindu taxpayer money will be spent on POK Muslims. Every single Ask Abhijit's episode, I have multiple questions on POK. Now look, if you want to take POK, what will you do with the millions of people who live in POK? Obviously, you have to take them, right? Otherwise, don't take POK. Don't reclaim POK. You can't evict millions of people out of the place they've been living in for decades, for generations. You can't. Will it affect India's demography, internal security? It will definitely change India's demographics to a certain extent. It may definitely affect India's internal security. taxpayer money will be spent on them, yeah. But then the question you have to ask yourselves is India, is this Hindu taxpayer money? Most of it is, okay. But is India a Hindu nation? India is not a Hindu nation, by the way. India is a secular socialist republic, right? And in India, Hindus are essentially second class citizens, aren't they? So what will it change? More of the same. But at least you will have POK, right? Vikram Geopolitical says the Portuguese and Spanish were much more chilled out than British and French when it comes to colonialism. The indigenous tribes were not wiped out in South America, unlike North America. Neither the Portuguese and Spanish sucked out the resources of their colonies, and unlike what France did in Africa and Britain did in South Asia. In today's world, the past Spanish and Portuguese colonies have higher HDI and GDP per capita. Why so? Okay, let's go to our friend Google and Google a few things to see whether these claims out down here are correct or not. So we open a fresh blank page of Google and let me Google Tierra del Fuego. Tierra del Fuego is an archipelago in South America. Okay, if I go to the map, then it will show me what place. Okay, this region. Okay, the southern tip of of South America. Now let's go back and say natives. Natives. The Fuegians are the natives. Okay, what did they look like? So they looked like this. Let's go back to Google and look at Wikipedia. Wikipedia is a bad source of information for India, but in this case, in many cases, it's a bad source of information. But I'm just looking at it for the sake of convenience. So the Fuegians they were the indigenous inhabitants of this place, Tierra del Fuego, at the southern tip of South America. They have been wiped out of existence. These are Julius Popper, a person who is killing various these natives, shooting them like they're wild animals. Check it out. Okay, this is what they looked like in 1915. They still existed in 1915. Look at these innocent faces, these children, women, men, children, families. Okay. So one of these cultures was called the Siknam, and yeah, they were genocided, as you can see. There was an internment camp and all that, and once again, killings. These are children from 1898. I wonder what happened to these two kids, and so on. So this is just one example, Tierra del Fuego. When it comes to the nation of Argentina, where are the natives? When it comes to many parts of South America, the natives have disappeared. They have been entirely exterminated out of existence. If you read the accounts of the Spanish conquistadors who first invaded various South American cultures, you will see that they were anything but chilled out. They were brutal, they were barbaric, they were bloodthirsty. Whether it is Hernan Cortés, Francesco Pizarro, Coronado, or Del Soto, or whoever, they were brutes. They killed incredibly shocking amounts of people. So I would very much disagree that the Portuguese and Spanish were much more chilled out than the British and French. The truth is that the British were much more systematic and rigorous in exterminating native populations. The Portuguese and Spanish did not do a thorough enough job. The Spanish did kill off many populations, like the people I just showed you just now in Tierra del Fuego, also the Arawak people of Hispaniola, and so many more. But if you look at North America, if you look at Florida, if you look at many of these places, huge regions of the United States and North America, the natives have been entirely exterminated. So the British did a much better job of exterminating the natives. The British eventually morphed into the Americans. I mean, the United States. Uh, when it comes to sucking out resources, the Spanish sucked out everything of value from the Inca, from the Aztec, from various other places. Everything was of value. Every single microgram of gold was sucked out and sent to Europe, to Spain. And it funded the lavish lifestyle of the Spanish court and the various wars they were fighting in Europe. They sucked everything out. The Portuguese did not go to the Americas, they went eastwards. And they did the same thing wherever they could. They were also bloodthirsty and barbaric and brutal. And they also attempted to genocide everything out of existence. The Portuguese probably weren't that good enough. Of course, they did unleash the Inquisition, the brutal, barbaric, inhuman Inquisition on Goa and so on. And they did a lot of bad things as well in other places, the Portuguese. But overall, when it comes to being brutally effective, the British were far better. A nation of bookkeepers, right? Shopkeepers, whatever. They were very effective, much more than the Spanish and the Portuguese. Uh, the French were reasonably good as well. Yes. So today's past Spanish and Portuguese colonies, do they have higher human development index, HDI? Argentina, how is it? Former Spanish colony. Not so good. Peru, if you look at the whole map of South America, most of these are former Spanish and Spanish colonies, except for Brazil, which has Portuguese influence. So if you look at these past Spanish colonies, the HDI and all is it's quite bad actually. If you look at the Dominican Republic, where the capital is Santo Domingo, a city that Columbus founded, abysmal levels of everything, terrible economy, tremendous corruption, rampant corruption, and so on. When it comes to the British colonies in the Americas, all are first world. When it comes to the Spanish colonies, they're all second or third world. In Asia, it's a different story, but we're talking about the Americas here. So, yeah. So I don't think you have to really study history in more detail to understand that the Spanish and the Portuguese were not chilled out. They were just as brutal and barbaric as any other European invader of non-European cultures. Shubhankar Kulkarni says, do you think if Germany had respected the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact and not invaded the USSR and had fully focused on ensuring England falls, then they would have had significant chances of winning the Second World War? After England down, the entire Western Front was secured, probably then focus. Okay, all right. So the question is, okay, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact was an agreement between the USSR and Germany. Molotov, USSR, Ribbentrop, Germany. Okay, this was an agreement with secret clauses. So it was a non-aggression pact that we won't attack each other, we won't be aggressive to each other, and there were a bunch of secret clauses in which they decided on how to divide up Poland and Eastern Europe. So that was the pact. It was signed in 1939, if I am not mistaken, in the very, very beginnings of the Second World War. And this pact was unilaterally broken by Adolf Hitler in 1941 when he launched Operation Barbarossa, which was an invasion of the USSR. By this time, the Germans had taken over the entirety of Europe, barring the UK. They'd taken over France, they'd taken over everything else. The USSR was free, was still independent on the east, and in Western Europe there was only one independent entity, the UK. And there was this whole Battle of Britain that happened and so on. And then Hitler decides to invade the USSR. And his forces were almost on the outskirts of Moscow. They could see Moscow from binoculars. But then he made a fatal mistake, Hitler, and he decided to prioritize the march, the invasion down south towards the Caspian Sea, where you have lots of oil and gas supplies, resources, because that was something that Germany needed. But he did not prioritized the push towards Moscow. He prioritized the push towards the south, the Caucasus region, and he got mired up in Leningrad, the Battle of Leningrad, and all that, which was a complete disaster. And once you make a mistake in Russia, something really bad happens, and that something really bad is old man winter. And once winter sets in, you are doomed if you're an invading force. Napoleon learned it, and it destroyed him. And the same thing happened to the Germans. So they were at the outskirts of Moscow when they started freezing, like just freezing to death. Um, and even if, let's say, they had not prioritized the Caucasus and had gone just straight for Moscow, even then there was no guarantee of winning, because the USSR has inexhaustible territory. Napoleon took Moscow. He got nothing out of it. The Russian government simply moved out of Moscow and burned the city, and then handed it over to Napoleon. It was a hollow victory. He spent a month in a hollow, burned out shell of a city. The Russians would have done the same thing had Hitler decided to prioritize the march on Moscow. They would have burned Moscow, and Hitler would have taken an empty, burned out city. So I think overall it was a mistake to attack the USSR. Of course, Hitler realized that the USSR was enormously powerful. It had tremendous amounts of resources. So that's why he wanted probably to launch a decapitation strike on Stalin. Take out Stalin, take out the leadership of the Communist Party, and then you can do a regime change, and then it's fine. But he miscalculated by prioritizing the Caucasus instead of Moscow in that case. But what that did is that it gave the Americans and the British time to, some breathing space. The Americans were able to resupply the UK, and then eventually they were able to march on Normandy, do the crossing of the English Channel, land in Normandy, and start taking over piece by piece France. And things go bad around Barbarossa. Around the time that the Germans mess up in Barbarossa, the winter of 41, the spring of 42, that's when the tide turns. And the credit for the victory is given to the Americans, but it was the Soviets who did the vast majority of the fighting and the dying and the winning. Yeah, but it was a mistake by Hitler. I think at the end of the day, I think he wanted to win everything. He wanted to conquer the whole world. The same kind of hubris that Napoleon had. He had already conquered much of Europe. Had he just settled down and consolidated his power in Europe instead of attacking the USSR, even if the UK remained independent, he would have had a much better outcome for his country, possibly. Yeah, so it's a lot of ifs and buts, but that's how things went. Gaurav Jat Mamli says, how did France manage to remain quasi-independent with a quasi-independent foreign policy, self-control over its nukes, and a most significant geopolitical player in Europe after the US? On the other hand, Britain, which had the biggest empire and was once the most powerful player, was a superpower, couldn't manage to have all of the above. What did the French do differently from the British? Yeah, good question. So what do the French have that the other members of NATO don't have? Is a good question. It's a good way to look at it. There's one thing the French don't have that everybody else has. The French don't have US occupation forces on their territory. There's not a single American military base on French soil. There's no permanent US troops stationed anywhere in France. France is a member of NATO, and there are some obligations, but there is not a single American military base or troop presence on French soil. That's what they did differently. Every other nation, Germany has permanent US military bases. It's under US military occupation. The same goes with Italy. The same is the case for many other members of NATO and the European Union. Turkey even harbors American nuclear missiles on its soil. The Netherlands also, apparently. And when it comes to the UK, they also have a significant US military presence on UK territory. So that's what France did differently. Now, the UK, until the 1980s, was very independent. Um, until as long as Margaret Thatcher was in power, and there was a transition period when John Major was in power, when the UK was still kind of independent, and everything collapsed. The sovereignty collapsed once Tony Blair came to power. He is referred to as George W. Bush's poodle. A very unkind thing to say, but maybe it's factual. So as long as Margaret Thatcher was in power, the UK had a very strongly independent foreign policy. They went against US wishes when they invaded the Falklands, the Malvinas War, the Falklands War, 81 was it, and so on. And you may remember there was something called the Troubles in Ireland. So the British, uh, they occupy Northern Ireland. So Northern Ireland is British occupied Northern Ireland. Okay, like we have Pakistan occupied Kashmir, similarly we have British occupied Northern Ireland. It's not British or English territory, but they occupy it. And there was this long insurgency that tore the country for decades. The insurgency was Irish nationalists and patriots fighting the occupation forces of the British. And there were bomb blasts and terrorist attacks and freedom fight attacks and whatnot for decades. Bombings, shootings, all kinds of British atrocities against Irish people in Ireland and so on. And all of this went on for decades. And it's funny, at the moment Tony Blair comes to power and becomes pro-US, immediately the Irish troubles end. And the Good Sunday or whatever agreement is signed and everything is over. How did that happen like that, as if by magic? The moment the UK becomes pro-US and a proper vassal, instantaneously the Irish insurgency ends. How does that happen? How is it even possible? Is there somewhere two and two that we can add together? Maybe there is. So that's how the British were able to, the Americans were able to take over the British, and they already controlled much of Western Europe. But France has always managed to stay out of this by ensuring that there is no US military presence on French soil. So that is what France has done differently. Feline Lover says, I know this is not geopolitics or history, but what do you think about the Asiatic lion relocation program? The problems that are being faced because of the Gujarat government refusing to share lions with other states. This is bad for the long-term well-being of the animal. So we have to understand that this animal was once found throughout large parts of India, not just in Gujarat, but all across India. India is the only part of the world where you have lions as well as tigers. But the British policies ensure that the cheetah was exterminated and the lion and tiger were both persecuted. And at the end of the day, the lion ended up existing only in the Gir forest region of Gujarat, a small part of Gujarat. And that's what the situation is today. In the past, it was present in Mesopotamia, in Persia, and other parts of Asia. It's the Asian lion, even in Saudi Arabia. So it only exists in Gujarat today, in the Gir region. And it is good for the well-being of the species that it is distributed geographically across various parts of India. So that if there is some kind of epidemic or some kind of virus outbreak or something in one part of India, it doesn't kill the entire lion population. And then we are done. It's over. Right? So it makes sense for this species to be distributed across various habitats in multiple parts of India. And that's why there is this Asiatic lion relocation project, and they've proposed various places, Madhya Pradesh and some other locations. But unfortunately, the government of Gujarat is blocking this move, because this lion is the pride of Gujarat. We are the only state of India that has a lion, and we will not give it up. We will not share it with other states, because that will reduce the importance of Gujarat. I think that is a very myopic way of looking at the world. Okay, the species is a national treasure. We don't want the species to die out. It just takes one virus outbreak or disease outbreak to kill an entire population. It is very important that we we distribute the species across various parts of India. So I think it would be a good move for the Gujarat government to allow this project to go ahead, right? I hope it happens. Okay, photo here. Patel says, why are life forms so fragile? Why did most of them evolve mechanisms of reproduction then of repairing themselves for eternity? I think it will certainly be possible to be immortal in the future if we keep on having breakthroughs in science. So why didn't nature make us immortal? Look, I don't know why nature did not make us immortal. There are certain species of jellyfish that are apparently immortal, but organisms like us, uh, we are not. Now, are we that fragile? See, let's take a phone. Okay, a phone. I slam the phone on the floor or a table, it will shatter. I take my hand and I slam it. Perfectly fine. Same amount of force. So life forms aren't fragile. Life forms are anti-fragile. Okay, you can deadlift or squat 200 kilos if you train yourself well enough, and you can take the entire weight on your shoulders if you're squatting. If you're pulling the deadlift movement, then 200 kilos on 8 fingers. That's all. That's it. That's how you're pulling it. Of course, if you do it properly, you will not hold it in your fingers, but in the palm of your hand. But you can imagine how much pressure is being exerted on this soft tissue, and yet you thrive. So we are not fragile. We are actually anti-fragile. We can survive a lot. We can survive a whole lot. But yes, we have a limited lifespan. It depends on the length of the telomeres. And as your telomeres, uh, they shorten, you show signs of aging, and eventually you no longer can stay alive at some point in life. But hopefully by the time you pass on your genes, and your future generations can thrive, and that's the way it is. So I don't know why it has evolved this way or that way. Maybe there was a good evolutionary reason for it to be this way. Um, but we are not that fragile. We are actually quite robust. We can take a lot. Um, I'm not sure if it will be possible to be immortal in the future. I'm not sure if it's even desirable to be immortal in the future. Let me tell you why. Look, we typically live 80, 90, 70 to 100 years. 100 is like an outlier. Typically 70s and 80s, if you live until that age, you've lived a good life and a long life. Now you will see that most people who live to that age start having issues with their memory, right? Some people are super sharp even in their hundreds, even past 100 years of age. But most people by the age of 70, 80, 90, they start having issues with their memory. So and most people believe that we only use 5% of our brain capacity, which is an absolute myth. We use the fullest of our brain capacity. Most of us, we use it entirely. Now our brain has these neural connections, synapses and all that, and it is these neural connections and all of that that creates that is the mechanism of the storage of memories in the brain. And let's say your brain will be full of memory by the time you're 80 or 90 years old. Now let's say we develop the means of extending this human body's lifespan to 200 years. Okay, let's say we can hypothetically do it in the future. What's going to happen to your brain and the memories it stores? Eventually your brain is going to run out of space for storing memories, and you're going to have to start overwriting new memories of new experiences over the old memories, which means by the time you're 150, you may have forgotten the first 50 years of your life, and you may no longer be the same person. And of course, as the brain ages, you may prolong the life of the body, but what about the life of the brain? The brain may develop defects like the plaques that are typical of Alzheimer's disease and whatnot. What will you do about that? So you may prolong the life of the body but end up with a completely damaged mind. Do you want that? Maybe it's an experience that's torturous for the one who is experiencing that. Maybe it's not desirable. Maybe there's a reason why we live a certain amount of years. So I don't know. At the end of the day, I'm speculating here, but think along these lines. Try and think outside of the box. Okay, it's not just a physical thing being immortal. You have to be immortal, and have sufficient consciousness and sufficient quality of life. And if immortality gives you mental torture, do you want that? If it ends up meaning that you are no longer the person you were when you were born, then do you want that? What's the point of that? Do you really want to be immortal? That's the question, right? Then, okay. Okay, two questions one by Sun Moon and the other by Vikram Geopolitical. Is 90 hours working per week, will it make India great again? This is not healthy at any cost. L&T boss SN Subramaniam endorses 90-hour work week. Has he gone mad? Do you think India should also have labor-friendly laws like Europe? Okay, and Narayan Murthy also has said that we need to work like 300 hours a week or something, right? So here's the deal. If you are working 80 hours a day and it's 7 days, if you 90 hours and 90 hours per week, and you have 7 days in a week, so that's more than 12 hours a day. 12 sevens are 84. It's almost 13 hours a day. Let's say you take one day off, then it's like 90 hours in 6 days. It's 15 hours a day. So a person who is asking you to work that long, first of all, is he going to ensure that everybody is paid sufficiently? And secondly, if you're working 15 hours a day, will you not go mad? Will you see? There are certain examples, that one can put forth. I can think of two nations that have a similar work ethic. One is South Korea, one is Japan. There's this focus on productivity, this focus on working tremendously hard, extremely brutally long work hours and all that. South Korea as well as Japan. Look at Japan today, look at South Korea today. Japan's demography is collapsing. Their birth rates have collapsed. They could no longer have children in the country by 2070. There may be nobody born in Japan after 2070. That's the direction in which Japan is going because of this brutal work culture. And you can see the same thing happening in South Korea. The birth rates have collapsed. Nobody wants to have children anymore. So if you make people work that hard, they may be able to work that hard, but everything else will suffer. There'll be no family life. There'll be no children anymore. The nation will cease to exist as a population within 100 years, maybe within 50 years. So the South Korean thing started in the 1960s and 70s. That's about 50, 60 years ago, and see where they are today. By 2050, they could be in an abysmal state of affairs, South Korea. So when you force people to work that hard, whether it's motivated or not, whether it's just by forcing them, you're going to end up collapsing the entire demography of the country. And that will destroy the country long run. And the second thing is, can you even motivate somebody to work that hard? No, it's like this. The future of the nation doesn't depend on the entire population. The future of the nation and the civilization depends on the top performers, which is the 0.1%. They set the standards, and everybody else tries to maintain some semblance of that. But it's the success of the 0.1% that determines the future of the country. Now, what if you make the 0.1% work 15 hours a day? So India's population is 1.5 billion. 1/10 of that is 150 million. 1/10 of that is 15 million. And 1/10 of that is 1.5 million. So let's say you make 1.5 million Indians, which is 0.1% of 1.5 crores. 1.5 million Indians, they will be made to work 90-hour work weeks. The question is, how will you motivate them? If the government is doing its best to take India in the right direction, and if society gives you everything that you need in exchange for working that hard, then you will be motivated. But when you have this crumbling infrastructure, when you have the lack of merit, when you have people who work hard being taxed and others not paying any tax, when you have inequality, when you have an Hindu-phobic apartheid state, When you have all these problems, and when you have other nations that do so well and give so much back to their people, how will you motivate people to work that hard? Right? So on the one hand, you expect people to work that hard. On the other hand, you expect them to ask for nothing in return. Not better living standards, not better preferential treatment, not less taxes, nothing, no recognition, nothing. Then who will work hard? So I think working 90 hours per week is madness. Even expecting most people to do it voluntarily is madness. People work that hard only if they have a very clear goal, which is personal to them, and it's not forever. Maybe I have to work 15 hours, 90 hours a week for the next 2 years. But at the end of the day, I get this big jackpot, which is going to be my achievement and mine alone. Then, yeah, I can sacrifice everything and work 90-hour weeks for 2 years. But if you ask people to just indefinitely keep working 90-hour work weeks and they get nothing in exchange in return for that, it's not going to happen. I would say let's have a 40-hour work week, but let's give employment to all 1.4 billion Indians. Can we do that? That itself is enough to completely supercharge India's growth. Even that's not happening right now. So that's a problem. Sun Moon says, what are your thoughts on veganism? Veganism is where so we know what vegetarianism is. We have lots of vegetarians in India. It's been a cultural practice for many Indians historically. Vegetarianism is when you don't eat any meat. So your main diet is vegetables and vegetable products, plant products, and vegetarians also consume dairy products, which is milk and cheese and paneer and all that. That's vegetarianism. Veganism means you cut out all animal products, all dairy products. So you can't even consume milk. You can't even eat cheese or any such thing. You can have almond milk and almond cheese and tofu and things like that. So that's an extreme variant of vegetarianism. What are my thoughts? I think it's up to you. You want to be a vegan, be a vegan. You want to be vegetarian, be vegetarian. It's up to you entirely. I think veganism is a little too extreme, the way I see it. Okay, it's up to you, whatever you want to do. The way I see it is like that. I think but at the end of the day, it's your choice. I think veganism may be overly restrictive. It may end up causing health issues. I think vegetarianism, we know, is sustainable because Indians have practiced that for thousands of years. So vegetarianism is sustainable. You can be healthy and live a good life as a vegetarian. As a vegan, I'm not very sure about that. Of course, some people may disagree, but it's up to you. And at the end of the day, it's your choice. And nobody can take that away from you. Akhand Bharat says, I want to start listening to Indian classical music. Any good places to start from? Well, I could do a 2-hour live stream on Indian classical music. So Indian classical music is the world's oldest musical tradition. It's an incredibly profound and rich musical tradition, the greatest musical tradition the world has ever seen. And most Indians don't know about it. So that's why we get this question, and I'm glad we get this question. So when it comes to Indian classical music, you have various instruments. For example, you have the flute, you have the sitar, you have the sarod, you have the tabla, and of course you have vocal music, which is singing. When it comes to sitar, so first of all, if you want to listen to Indian classical music, you should go to YouTube. I think YouTube has plenty of material for you to look at. Okay, so when it comes to sitar players, I would recommend, see, three of the greats. One is Pandit Ravi Shankar, the late Pandit Ravi Shankar. The other is the late Pandit Nikhil Banerjee. The third is the late Pandit Vilayat Khan. Three of the greats. I'm sure there are many more, but I'll not name all of them. So anything that these three have produced is bound to be great. Not just good, but great. When it comes to the flute, you have two of the greats, Pannalal Ghosh and Hari Prasad Chaurasia. Their music is beautiful. When it comes to the sarod, which is a fretless string instrument, you have two of the greats in Ustad Amjad Ali Khan and Ustad Ali Akbar Khan. Beautiful music there. Then you have instruments like the Shehnai, Ustad Bismillah Khan was one of the greats of the Shehnai. Then you have the santoor, which is a string instrument that you hammer it with these little hammers. Santoor. Uh, Shiv Kumar Sharma is one of the greats, and the great Pandit Bhajan Sopori. My God, what a great santoor player he was, but very obscure. No one knows about him. Pandit Bhajan Sopori. Amazing, amazing, beautiful music. When it comes to vocal, classical music, which is singing, you have the great MS Subbulakshmi. Carnatic music. So in Indian classical music, you have two categories, which is Northern Indian classical music and the Carnatic music, which is Southern Indian music. They have the same ragas and all with different names. So MS Subbulakshmi was one of the great vocalists. You have Pandit Bhimsen Joshi, one of the great vocalists. Also, people like Pandit Jashraj, Kishori Amonkar. If you like the Khayal style, then you have Rajan Sajan Mishra. If you like the Drupad style of singing, which is one of the oldest primordial forms of vocal singing, then you have the Dagar brothers, two generations of Dagar brothers. Dagar Bandhu, they say. Uh, Two generations of them, and so on. So there's so much to peruse, and then there's also you have to understand what a raga is, because Indian classical music is raga based. A raga in standard guitar playing, you have scales, which is just the sa re ga ma pa dha ni sa and up and down, and you can have other scales with other notes beyond the major notes. You have minor notes, flat notes, and augmented notes, and sharp notes, and so on and so forth. That various scales exist. Okay, mixolydian scale and all that. But a raga is more than a scale. A raga has an ascending scale and a descending scale. It has a major note, a dominant note, and a subdominant note. It also has drone notes, and in a raga, the ascending and descending scales can be different. So there are many ragas that depend on the time of the day. You have morning ragas, afternoon ragas, evening ragas, ragas, dawn yagas, night ragas, and all. You also have seasonal ragas like rainy season and all that. So Malhar is a rainy season raga. Raga Vibhas, Raga Bhairav are dawn ragas. Raga Jait, Raga Marva are dusk ragas, and so on. So much more. And then it's a whole system. So if you like happy ragas, I would say listen to Raga Pahari, very happy. It's a pentatonic raga, 5 notes, and so on. So there's a lot to say. So these are some of the recommendations I can give you. Check it out, and good luck on your journey. I wish more people would listen to Indian classical music. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Okay, we are almost at the end of today's live stream. Geopolitical Dubey gives a great recommendation. Lag Bhimpala Shri. Bhimpala Shri, also called Bhimpala Si. Yeah, indeed. And Sparkling Lotus. So Sparkling Lotus says Raga Malkons. It's a night raga. Beautiful raga. And if you listen to this to a night raga, you actually feel sleepy. You know that? So Malkons was called Malav Koshik back in the day. Now it's called Malkons. Yes, indeed. Okay, let's take maybe a couple of questions from the live chat. Amisha asks, do wormholes exist? We have never seen a wormhole, and we have never seen an object that we have been able to confirm is a wormhole. We know of many black holes that exist. The first black hole that was discovered ever was the Cygnus 61 black hole. And now we know that there are black holes all over the place. There's one in our own galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy. And so we know of many black holes today. But it's also possible that many of these black holes could possibly be the mouths of wormholes. It's possible, because a wormhole's mouth would also have very similar characteristics as a standard black hole. So maybe they exist, and maybe they're just pretending to be black holes. Maybe at the center of every galaxy, there's a wormhole, not a black hole. Possible. It's possible, but we don't know for sure. So there are no confirmations of wormholes existing, but we know theoretically from the field equations of general relativity, wormhole solutions exist. So wormholes should exist. And what would a wormhole look like? We think of a wormhole as a hole in a sheet of paper, right? But a wormhole exists in 4-dimensional space-time. And therefore, if a hole in a sheet of paper is 2-dimensional, then a wormhole would have 3 dimensions. So a wormhole would actually be spherical. It would not be a hole in space-time. It would be a spherical object. You go in there and you end up somewhere else. That's what a wormhole would look like. But we don't know. We don't have any confirmations of any wormholes thus far. Okay. Anything else? I know there's a million questions, but I think I'm gonna have to end it here now. Okay, I'm gonna end the live stream right here. Should I take one more? I guess not. It's already 2 hours, 15 minutes. So thank you so much for all your questions. Apologies to all of you whose questions I could not take today, but we're going to keep doing this week after week, and hopefully I take everybody's questions. Please ask your best questions every time, and I'll take the best of the lot. So keep asking questions and keep raising your standards, and I will see you in the next live stream reasonably soon enough, next week. Until then, take care. Thank you, and I'll see you soon. Bye.